Peace and greetings. My name is Nazari with the Disciples of Truth, and today I'm going to be doing a breakdown on whether or not the Messiah consumed fish or if he fed people fish as well. And the answer to that is absolutely not. He did not consume fish. He did not give people fish to eat. And we are not supposed to be consuming fish. We're not supposed to be consuming flesh. I'm going to prove using the very text, the very scriptures, that it was in fact added to the text. And I'm going to show that by way of how the Gospels contradict each other when you get into the stories. Okay? So, I know that's a bold claim, but at the end of the day, the book says what it says. It says that the pen of the scribes is in vain. It also tells us that we're not supposed to kill, etc. So, the opening scripture I'm going to be starting with is Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 15, and I'm going to read 2:16. And it reads, The power liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from the lands whither he had driven them, and I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. Behold, I will send for many fishers, saith the power, and they shall fish them, and after will I send for many hunters. So I'm basically setting up the foundation as we go into some precepts about fishers, right? It said that I would set up many fishers, says the Lord, and they shall fish them. So it is telling you, or it's talking about being fishers of men. And we will see if the New Testament can edify this particular text. Sorry. Okay. So, but I'm going to read Jeremiah straight through again so you can know where we're going with this. It says, The power liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands whither he had driven them. And I will bring them again into their land that I have given unto their fathers. Behold, I will send for many fishers, says the Lord, and they shall fish them. And after will I send for many hunters. So he is talking about fishers of men. Let's see. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18 to 20. It says, The Messiah, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. So the Messiah is already deterring people from fishing. Okay, let's continue to prove it. Mark chapter 1, verse 16 to 18, it says, Now, as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. And straightway they forsook their nets and followed him. So we have the account in Matthew. We also have another account in Mark. Okay, now it's interesting because as we go further into it, we would see that in the book of John, this was altered greatly. All right, and this is where I'm saying this was completely added. We're going to prove it, okay? But now let's see if we could continue with Luke for now. Luke chapter 5, verse 1 to 11. I'm going to read through all of Luke. Well, not all of it, but the text that I just said. Luke chapter 5, verse 1 to 11, it says, And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of him, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and saw two ships standing by the lake. But the fishermen were gone out of them, and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, where was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now, when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answered, said unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word I will let down the net. And when they had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their nets broke. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at the Messiah's knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes, which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the son of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And the Messiah said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. Now, this just reiterates what was spoken of in Mark chapter 1, verse 16 and 18. It says, Stop what you're doing, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18 to 20. It says, Stop what you're doing, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. He was not condoning fishing. And I'm going to go back over Luke again, because there's some points in there where you could say, oh, he was encouraging them to fish. But if he was encouraging them to fish, then why did it was a judgment. It really was a judgment, because now they have so many fish, the boats are about to sink. So why would they be to that extreme where the boats are about to sink, nets are about to break? Okay? And so they basically had to leave it there. They had to leave the catch and go back because they could not take it. Let's just go over the whole story yet again. Luke chapter 5, verse 1 to 11, it says, And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret and saw two ships standing by the lake. But the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now, when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, Launch out into the deep, and let down your net for a draught. And Simon answered, said unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. How is this a good thing? Okay? How is this a positive thing? Then it says, when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at the Messiah's knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man. So what sin is Peter confessing to right now? It says he fell down at his knees and he said, Depart from me, I'm a sinful man. The only thing he was doing was fishing. So you tell me, what sin was he committing that he would say, oh, I am a sinful man, depart from me? Now it says, For I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes, which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the son of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And the Messiah said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought their ships to land, it didn't say they brought the ships and they brought all the fish with them. It says, and when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. That's all they did. They forsook everything that they were doing and they followed. He said, come with me, I will make you fishers of men. Do not catch fish. All right. Now, why is it that John tells a completely different story? A contradictory story. Now, even if you were to go and look this stuff up, look up John 21 being inserted into the Bible, and they would tell you that, hey, we put it in there. I mean, the information is out there. You could I know we don't just go and believe it because they say something. However, based on the actual text that we are about to read, we can see how it varies in comparison so much to what we read in Luke, what we read in Mark, what we read in Matthew. Okay, let's get into it. This is John chapter 21, verse 3 to 13. It's supposed to be the same account of what took place in Luke, because that's how the Gospels are set up. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are supposed to be talking about the same thing. Let's get into it. John 21, verse 3 to 13. It says, Simon Peter said unto them, I go a fishing. They say unto him, We also go with thee. They went forth and entered into a ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing. Okay, now remember, we also read in Luke, just to re-edify that, it's the same account in Luke where they talked about, they haven't caught anything all night. They've been out here. But he said, nevertheless, at your word, I'll go and do it. Now, so that would be, that was Luke chapter 5, verse 5. It says, Simon answered, said unto him, Master, we have toiled all night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down thy net. Okay, so John and Luke is supposed to be given the same testimony. All right, let's see. Now we continue. John 21, verse 4. But when the morning was come, the Messiah stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was him. Then he said unto them, Children, have ye any meat? They answered him, No. And he said unto them, Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. Then it says, They cast their net therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fish. Okay, so it again talks about a multitude of fish. And it says now, he went there and he asked them, Children, have ye any meat? Okay, we're going to break that down. I see it. Don't worry about it. We're not going to miss anything. So now when we go to Luke chapter 5, verse 6, it says, And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. Now we're reading in John chapter 5, right? Let's go verse 5 and 6. It says, Then he said unto them, Children, have ye any meat? They answered him, No. And he said unto them, Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. They cast their net, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fish. So it doesn't speak anything about the nets breaking. But yet still, they had a multitude of fish. Let's go to verse 7. Therefore that disciple whom he loved said unto Peter, It is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. Now, what is this about? Why is Simon Peter fishing with a bunch of men naked? Like, what was the point? What was the point of putting this? And it's inserted because now they have it in brackets. Like, what was the point of bringing up that alleged happening? It makes no sense. So they were just, let's go fishing naked, and only Simon Peter is naked? Who does that? Does that make any sort of sense? This is how we know that the whole account in John is a fabrication. Because then you'd have to explain to me why Simon Peter was on a boat full of men naked, catching fish. You'd have to explain that to me. Let's read it again. So, therefore, that disciple whom he loved said unto Peter, It is the Lord. Now, when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, in brackets, and did cast himself into the sea. This is not accounted anywhere in Matthew, Mark, or Luke, but they have it here in John. And the other disciples came in a little ship, for they were not far from land, but as it were 200 cubits, dragging the net with fishes. As soon as they were come to land, they saw a fire of coals. Now, wait a minute. So they dragged the net with the fishes to land. But in Luke, it doesn't say that. It said that their nets began to break. That's what it says in Luke. And the boats began to sink. So why is John saying something completely different? It makes absolutely no sense. They're saying something different because, again, when you do the research, they will tell you, we put that whole chapter in the book. We inserted it. That's what it tells you. As I'll read that part again, verse 9. As soon as they were come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid thereon, and bread. And Christ said unto them, Bring of the fishes which ye have now caught. Now hold on a second. Remember earlier in the same chapter, he went and he said, Hey, do you have any meat? Now they get back and it says, As soon as they were come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fishes laid thereupon, and bread. So why was he asking for something that was already there? Now, understand, they did not come back and set this up. They were still out, allegedly. They're still supposed to be out. So now they come in, and listen to the wording that they have. As soon then as they were come to land, they saw a fish of coals there, and a fish laid thereon, and bread. So they had bread too. So he had fish and he had bread, and he was asking them for meat. And the Messiah said unto them, bring the fish which ye have now caught. Don't get into how twisted John read this chapter really is in John. It says, and Christ said unto them, bring the fish which ye have now caught. Then it says, Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes. Now, how in the world, within the context of this story, can Simon Peter by himself, when it just told you they had to get reinforcements, right? They had to get another boat to bring this catch in. It says Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes. So one man drew these great fishes, 153. So Simon Peter by himself was able to carry 153 fish. The pen of the scribes is in vain, right? It says, and for all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. Who? How? You just told me in Luke that the net began to break. Now you're telling me in John that the net was not broken? This chapter was completely inserted into the text. And if you cannot see that by now, even within the parameters of what we're discussing within this chapter, then, I mean, you just don't want to see it. You want to consume fish. And I mean, that's fine. It's your life. I'm not here to dictate to anyone what they're supposed to do or what they have to do or what have you. I'm just telling you what the book says we're supposed to follow. Those who say they follow the book. I'm going to go over this part yet again. From verse 10, it says, and the Messiah said unto them, bring of the fishes which ye have now caught. Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes, 153. 153 fishes being brought in a net by one man. And for all there were so many, yet was the net not broken. But Luke chapter 5 verse 6, it says, and when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and the net brake. So was the net broken, or was the net not broken? I mean, we could use our knowledge or understanding and see which one of these stories make any type of sense. Why would the Messiah come and ask for meat, which is bread, if he already had? He already had sufficient, but yet still he's asking them if they have any. Like, no, it makes no sense. Now let's continue to verse 12. It says, the Messiah said unto them, come and dine. Now wait a minute. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he said, come with me and I will make you fishers of men. But now in the book of John, he's saying, come and dine. Why was this not spoken of in Matthew, Mark, or Luke? To come and dine. It says the Messiah said unto them, come and dine. And none of his disciples does ask him, who art thou? Knowing that it was the Lord. The Messiah then cometh and taketh bread and giveth them, and fish likewise. Ridiculous. This account in John is contradictory. It's contradictory. It was added to the text. He told them to come and dine. We didn't tell them to come and dine with anything concerning fish in any of the other Gospels, and they're supposed to say the same thing. Matthew, Mark, and Luke say the same thing. Remember, the scriptures also talk about you need to have two or more witnesses. So where is the precept for what's taking place in John? Can't find any. Okay? Now let's go into some more of proving this. It says in when he talk about also another point that I wanted to bring out. It says here, the Messiah then cometh and taketh bread and giveth them, and fish likewise. Where did the fish come from? You know, where all of a sudden not the fish, sorry. Where did the bread come from? If we're talking about meat, allegedly, from the context of what people believe, if that's the meat that they're talking about, why is it all of a sudden he had bread when he went there and he said, well, have you any meat? So he had already, because they weren't fishing for bread, they were fishing for fish. Okay, so let's get into Matthew chapter 16, verse 6 to 10. It says, then the Messiah said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. Which, when the Messiah perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do ye not yet understand, neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets he took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets he took up? It says absolutely nothing about fish. This is the Messiah speaking. Okay? He's saying, so I'm straying a little bit away, well, not a little bit away from the catching of the fish, but I'm straying away from that, and I'm getting into the part where we know where they have the story about fed the thousands, 5,000 people with 5,000 loaves and all that. So I'm getting into that story now to break down this misconception of fish even further. I'm going to read it again. Matthew chapter 16, verse 6 to 10. Then the Messiah said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. Which when the Messiah perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do ye not remember or understand the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets he took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets he took up. The Messiah said absolutely nothing about fish. Absolutely nothing about fish. So how did that end up coming up in the story? Let's get into it. Matthew chapter 14, verse 15 to 21. And it says,
hey, bro. Oh, yeah.
Hey, sir.
You want my video?
Mm-hmm. What up?
Nothing. I'm gonna go tell my mom.
All right. So, what are you going to get?
Couple things. I need some snacks.
All right. You want to wait till I want me to come when you want it done? Or you going home?
Oh, I go ahead. I didn't know, that's what I said. I didn't know you needed something.
I ain't coming yet. I've been in the house, Ali.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So, Matthew chapter 14, verse 15 to 21. It says, And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. But he said unto them, They need not depart. Give ye them to eat. And they said unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, Bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, and took 5 loaves, and took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and looked up to heaven. He blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitudes. Okay? And it says, And they did eat, and were filled. And they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Now, again, this story is talking about loaves. He did not give them any fish. Let's prove it. You might say, oh, we just read fish. Let's break it down now that we read through it. Let's break it down. It says, Matthew 14, verse 15 to 21. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. So they're supposed to go get provision, and not flesh. It says victuals. But he said unto them, They need not depart. Give ye them to eat. And they said unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Okay, this is what they said. Now let's see what he did. And then it says, he said, bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looked up to heaven. He blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples. It didn't say that he gave the loaf and the fish to his disciples. It says he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. So what did they distribute? The loaves. And the disciples to the multitudes, and they did all eat and were filled. And they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full, and they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So it's irrelevant if they had fish there or not, because it's telling you specifically. It says he took of the loaves. I'll read it again, verse 19. And he commanded the multitude to sit on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitudes. It doesn't say what took place with the fish, but the loaves were distributed. Okay? Now, let's get into Matthew chapter 15, verse 34 to 38. Right? Let's continue to break this down. It says, and the Messiah said unto them, how many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fish. Interesting, right? Because he asked them, how many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fish. Who asked you about fish? Ain't nobody asked you anything about any fish. Okay? Well, let's continue to get into this. It says, and he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the little fish, and gave thanks, and brake them, and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitudes. And they did all eat and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, besides women and children. Okay? Now, when it talks about the meat, when it says the broken meat, you don't have broken pieces of fish that you gather. That who does that? Who, like, really, who? I don't, when you look at the context of what is being conveyed, what is being spoken of here, that is not realistic. And we already read before what happened in Matthew. Now let's go through this again, and I'll break it down some more. And the Messiah said unto them, Matthew 15, verse 34 to 38, and the Messiah said unto them, how many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fishes. Now it's a few little fishes. Okay? So, now the thing about it is, he didn't ask anything about fish. He said, how many loaves have ye? And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks, and brake them, and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat and were filled. And they did all eat and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was 7 baskets full. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, besides women and children. Now, as we go further into this, we'll see how he divided the loaves and the fishes. So now, when we look at the term meat, if we go to Leviticus chapter 2, verse 1 to 4, it says, and when any will offer a meat offering unto the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour. So what's a meat offering? It says fine flour, and he shall pour oil upon it, and put frankincense thereon, and he shall bring it to Aaron's son the priest, and he shall take thereof his handful of the fine flour, and the oil thereof, with all the frankincense thereof, and the priest shall burn the memorial of it upon the altar, to be an offering made by fire, of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And the remnant of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is the thing most holy of the offering of the Lord, made by fire. And if thou bring an oblation of meat offering baked in the oven, it shall be unleavened cakes of fine flour mingled with oil, or unleavened wafers anointed with oil. Okay, so he's telling, just so I'm just bringing this out for when the Messiah went and when he asked earlier, have you any meat? So what is the meat that we're talking about? And when you will bring a meat offering unto the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour. So yes, we have to look at context to find out what the scriptures are talking about when they say certain things. Now let's get back to Matthew, to the New Testament, Matthew chapter 6, verse 38 to 44. Break this down some more. It says, he said unto them, how many loaves have ye? Again, he's asking for loaves. Go and see. And when they knew, they said, 5 and 2 fishes. Again, nobody asked about fish. And he commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks, by hundreds and by fifties. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and blessed, and brake the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fishes divided he among them. So now, again, verse 41, and he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and blessed and brake the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before them. So it's the same thing that we read in Matthew when he says he blessed the loaves and he gave it to the disciples, and the disciples gave it to the people. Now it says, and the 2 fishes divided he among them all. So it says he divided the fish. It doesn't say that he distributed the fish or he shared it out to the people. It says he divided. Divide means that he separated it. Again, we have to look at context and precepts to get the understanding of what we're dealing with. Then verse 42, it says, and they did all eat and were filled. And they took the 12. Sorry, someone was trying to call me. It says, and they did all eat and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and the fishes. And they did eat of the loaves. And they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 men. They that did eat of the loaves. That's what it says. Of the loaves. He divided the fish. So if we don't know what divide means to separate, let's look at some precepts to break that down, and I'll read that again. Psalm 78 verse 13, it says, he divided the sea and causes them to pass through. Okay. Lamentations 4 and 16, the anger of the Lord had divided them. Zechariah 14 and 1, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoils shall be divided in the midst of thee. So divide is a separation. He is separating things. So I'll read Matthew chapter 6, verse 38 to 44 again. So we have to be able to go through these scriptures line by line and get the understanding. It says, he said unto them, how many loaves have ye? What is the Messiah asking for? He's asking for loaves. Go and see. And when they knew, they say, 5 and 2 fishes. He asked for loaves. And he commanded them to make all to sit down by the companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks by hundreds and by fifties. And when they had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and blessed and brake the loaves. So he looked up to heaven and he blessed and brake the loaves. It didn't say he blessed and brake everything. And gave them to his disciples. He's talking about the loaves to set before them. And the 2 fishes divided he among them. Separated he. He separated the 2 fishes. Okay? And they did eat and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments and of the fishes. And they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 men. Goes back to the story. He said, do you not remember the 5,000 loaves and the 5,000? Don't you have the understanding? That's what he asked when we went to the precepts earlier, or the foundation to set this up. Okay, so we know what divide is. Now let's further go into another passage where they tried to manipulate to make it seem like it was fish. So Mark chapter 8 verse 1 to 9. Let's read that. It says, Mark chapter 8, verse 1 to 9. In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, the Messiah called his disciples unto him and said unto them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. Interesting now. They've been with him. So this is another account of the same story. They've been with him 3 days now, and they have had nothing to eat. And if I send them away fasting to their own houses, they will faint by the way, for divers of them come from far. Okay? So if they were out there for 3 days, how did they have fish? How did they have fish that did not spoil? You know, it does not add up. It's not talking about fish. And I'll tell you this, when I was looking up this years ago, and I went to the etymology of words, the word fishes was synonymous or in sync with bread in terms of origin, the origin of the word. So now through a dispensation of time, we get the understanding that words have evolved. So what it meant back then, it has a different meaning even now, and we know this to be a fact. But now when I go and look up this etymology online, it's not giving me that. And I wish I had screenshotted or saved it or what have you. So what I'll encourage you to do, if you have access to an old etymology book, you can look it up, and I guarantee you'd see the same thing. But let me get back to this, go over it. Mark chapter 8, verse 1 to 9. In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, the Messiah called his disciples unto him and said unto them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now been with me 3 days. So they've been there 3 days and have nothing to eat. It says they have nothing to eat. And if I send them away fasting to their own houses, they will faint by the way, for divers of them has come from far. Then it says in verse 4, and his disciples answered him, from whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? Satisfy these men with bread in the wilderness. And he asked them, how many loaves have ye? And they said, 7. So again, he's asking for loaves. How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7. And he commanded the people to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks and brake and gave to his disciples to set before them. And they did set them before the people, the loaves. And they had a few small fishes. And he blessed and commanded to set them also before them. So they did eat and were filled. And they took up the broken meat that was left, 7 baskets. And they that had eaten were about 4,000. And he sent them away. So again, we can see this, they tried to add this in, because it does not coincide with what we've read before, and even within the context of what we're reading now. I'll read from verse 4 again. And his disciples answered him, from whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? So they are asking for bread. They are in the wilderness. There's no fish out there. There's no fish. And he asked them, how many loaves have ye? The Messiah is asking for loaves. And they said, 7. And he commanded the people to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks and brake and gave to his disciples to set before them. And they set them before the people. So this is the same account that we read even earlier. He took of the loaves, and they had a few small fishes. Look at how they try to put this in the end. And they had a few small fishes. They already ate the bread. Right? Now, oh yeah, I just remember, we got some fish also. And he blessed and commanded to set them also before them. It just does not add up. So they did eat. They were filled. And I'm not even going to read that over again, because it's inserted. And that's just what it is. If you can't see it, if you don't have the understanding by now, then, you just want to be a victim to flesh. You want to walk in the flesh, and you don't want to walk in the spirit. And when you walk in the flesh, what you're doing is consuming animals. Okay? There's nobody that could get around, thou shalt not kill. You know? It says what it says. So how can you take the life? The scripture said that a righteous man regarded the life of a beast. This is what it says. So if you don't regard the life of these animals, how can you even regard the life of another human being? And this is why we don't even have that compassion for one another. This is why we can't love one another. Because you can't even, the things that are weaker than you take advantage of them. There's no necessity for you to consume flesh. There's none. And people say, well, oh, it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not murder. Okay, let's go with that. So a murder is the unlawful taking of a life. So indeed, you can murder animals because you don't have any justification. The animal is not a wild beast that's attacking a family member or attacking you and you have to defend yourself. That's different. Okay? So you are unjustly taking the lives of these animals. And what happened to like Leviticus chapter 17 verse 1 to 4 where it says that if you slaughter any animal and do not take it before the priest, you are going to be cut off. So if you want to follow these scriptures, then follow all of it. Don't go in there and be a Christian picking and choosing, oh, this sounds good, this fits the narrative. It says you have to take that animal to the priest or else you'll be cut off. Leviticus 17, 1 to 4. Go look it up. Don't take my word for it. I mean, it says what it says. Throughout these scriptures, we see where the Messiah is telling you, come with me, I'll make you a fisher of men. He didn't come and dine. How did they just, it's so off the wall for them to even put that in there when they had 3 other testimonials, 3 other stories telling you, come with me and I will make you a fisher of men. Okay? So, that's the breakdown for why or how fish got into the text and the understanding thereof. I hope it helps because this is a very requested topic. A lot of people keep asking me, well, why does it say fish? Why? So there you go. You have the breakdown. Peace. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High. Keep his commandments. This is the duty of man.